Okay, this is our group project on Chapter 6, which is Teaching Students with Emotional and Behavioral Disorders by Stephanie, Ashley, Anna, and myself, Marlena. Okay, so the basic concepts are that students with emotional and behavioral disorders have a problem adjusting to the school environment. And this is because many disabilities can affect them, such as anxiety, depression, psychosis, bipolar disorder, oppositional behavior, and ADHD. And most students have not only one of these disorders, but multiple. There have also been a variety of ways that these students have been classified. The first was called seriously emotionally disturbed, the second was behavioral disorders, and the third is emotional and behavioral disorders, or EBD, and this is what is used today because it best describes the students who receive special education services. Okay, the definition and identification. Since there's such a variety of disorders, it's very difficult to come up with a general definition. The definition has been changed multiple times, and the one that is used now by the federal government is derived from the work of Bauer and includes inability to learn, relationship problems, inappropriate behavior, unhappiness or depression, physical symptoms, or fears. Since the teacher is with the student most of the times, they end up being the one to identify the student. They then must follow the guidelines of IDEA, and if they do suspect that a student has EBD. Once a student is identified, the next step is to have a formal assessment. The first one is the strength-based assessment, which is based upon these 4 principles. All children have strengths. Assessing their strengths in addition to deficits may help motivate the child. Deficits should be viewed as opportunities to learn, and parents and students may be more willing to engage in treatment when the plan includes a focus on strengths. The second is a behavioral and emotional rating scale, which is mainly used to distinguish between students with and without behavioral disorders. And the third is the function-based assessment, which is most commonly used. This is defined as an analysis of the contingencies responsible for behavioral problems. This is a procedure to explain why a specific behavior occurs or what triggers the behavior. Then they identify what the behavior is and to explain why the behavior happens, as well as identify a way to change the behavior. This also helps teachers better understand the destructive behavior, which can lead to a better approach when handling the students. There are 6 subgroups of EBD. The first is conduct disorder, and this is when students seek attention or are disruptive and act out. The second is social aggression. Students with this will join a group of other students that are openly disruptive to peers, teachers, and parents. The third is attention problems and immaturity. Students have attention problems and are easily distracted or have poor concentration. The fourth is anxiety or they are withdrawn. Students may feel self-conscious, reticent, and unsure of themselves. The fifth is psychotic behavior. These students may hallucinate, deal in a fantasy world, and exhibit bizarre behavior. And the sixth is hyperactive. Students have difficulty sitting still, listening, and focusing. And the causation and risk factors of EBD are poverty and lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So children who come from these cultural influences have a higher chance of having EBD. Biological causes, there can be genetic disorders, brain dysfunction or damage, and health issues. There are also family factors, definition and structure. Single parent homes have a higher rate of EBD, as well as if there's abuse in the home. And then there are school-related factors, such as lower IQ or school instability. For a lot of students, this will happen if they bounce around from school to school, if they're moved a lot. Even if they're moved for their behavioral issues, it ends up creating more behavioral issues.
Okay. Characteristics of students with emotional and behavioral disorders. So each student with emotional and behavioral disorders will find that their disorders will range in type and intensity, which makes it difficult for teachers to be able to help them all in a set group, which means that each student needs to be taught and aided individually. Their behavior often is very disruptive and non-compliant and maybe aggressive towards the teacher or other students, which needs to be taken into account when working with these students. The students with emotional and behavioral disabilities often do not have the proper social skills, which are intrapersonal behaviors, peer-related social skills, teacher-pleasing social skills, self-related behaviors, assertiveness skills, and communication skills. Therefore, the environment of the classroom is very difficult for them to work in because they are lacking peer-related social skills and teacher-pleasing social skills. So it's causes more of a problem when trying to learn for themselves and for the other students. These are the characteristics of externalizing and internalizing behaviors and emotions. So on the left is externalizing, which is things that can be seen visually within the classroom, such as aggression, tantrum, defiance, lying, and stealing, things that are tangible and happening within the environment. And the internalizing on the right is what students with emotional and behavioral disorders feel within themselves, which is withdrawal, anxiety, depression, inappropriate crying, which just means that their emotions are skewed in comparison to students without emotional and behavioral disorders. The number of characteristics seen between these show that they can mix and match and therefore be really personalized to each student with an emotional or behavioral disorder. So academic achievement in general shows that students with emotional and behavioral disorders often fail more courses in school, more likely to be absent, have lower grade point averages, which eventually leads to a higher dropout rate for students with, rather than students who do not have emotional and behavioral disorders. Behavioral problems impede on academic achievement, but also academic achievement deficits are predictive of subsequent behavioral problems in the classroom. So, therefore, although their academic achievement depends on their behavior, their academic achievement also is relayed on the environment of the classroom as well that is seen. So with all this said, the future for students often will be talked about in a little bit, but it's often grim because they drop out of high school or struggle with high school and therefore struggle with their life out of high school. So it's always helpful to have intervention at a young age because each student performs at 2 levels below their grade level. Okay, so some factors to help with academic achievement is to provide systematic and explicit instruction of academic skills because of the difficulty of academic responding and engagement, to provide structure lessons with appropriate sequencing of tasks and pacing of instruction. Students with emotional and behavioral disorders are below average academically in reading, writing, and mathematics, and involve students in academic learning process, practice, apply, and review. Students often with emotional and behavioral disorders, because they're below average in reading, writing, and mathematics, they also have a lack of academic motivation. So the teachers need to stress meaningful content with them. And students with emotional and behavioral disorders have difficulty with strategic learning, which is test taking, note taking, things like that. So it's helpful for teachers to teach strategies for decoding unknown words, use learning strategies to promote effective studying and reading comprehension and math problem solving, increase academic engagement, so be doing the tasks on time, and use daily and weekly monitoring to measuring task success and skills acquisition. And then in this way, they should become normal average academically, but also feel that motivation to be on the same level as students without emotional and behavioral disorders. So the next characteristic of emotional and behavioral disorders is aggression, which are acting out behaviors seen with the externalizing factors. So students that the difficulties that could be seen with emotional and behavioral disorders is non-compliance with classroom and school rules, classroom disruptions, which is talking out of seat, talking out of turn, getting out of the seat, interacting with peers when it's not appropriate timing, fighting at school, and a use of profanity in inappropriate settings. So some helpful techniques for a teacher is to place efforts within the context of SWPBS, focus on building positive behaviors incompatible with classroom disruption, use different reinforcement strategies, relate high probability activities, so activities that they would rather do with low probability activities, so finishing work, tell them that they can do activities that they prefer if that they do the activities that need completion. Provide clear and direct requests to students that are associated with consequences. Consider use of timeout and response cost procedures if and as needed. And teach behavioral self-control. Students with aggression need to be taught how to handle their aggression, but also that there are consequences with their aggression so that the difficulties seen within the classroom lower. The next characteristic is attention. So students with emotional behavioral disorders have a hard time keeping their attention to learning tasks and also with the span and focus, so how long that they are focusing on the task and how much of their mind is able to focus on the task. So teachers should train EBD students to be aware of the importance of the attention and teach students to actively self-monitor their own attention. Inadequate peer relationships and social skills deficits is a difficulty with EBD students. So this means that they're using inappropriate or unsatisfactory interaction with peers. They feel social isolation and aren't strong with reciprocal relations with peers, which is part of the types of social skills spoken about earlier that they are lacking because of their EBD. So these students need help through the teacher to select specific target behaviors to teach and reinforce. Use direct instruction of skills to be acquired. Use peer tutoring programs to promote skills. Consider group contingencies to involve students in initiatives with peers. Evaluate carefully any packaged social skill programs used and stress generalization of learned skills across their environments. So often it's needed for teachers to set up relationships for students with EBDs and the regular students, but not set it up so either student becomes uncomfortable. And lastly is language development. EBD students have difficulty being receptive and expressive because of their disorder, so therefore teachers need to provide direct instruction of vocabulary words, encourage expression of thoughts in the classroom, provide appropriate language models, and build pragmatic skills by stressing appropriate social usage. So after high school, EBD students, because many of them struggle within high school, their school exit, employment, and post-secondary education is skewed. So most oftentimes, EBD students will drop out of high school, and they are less likely to graduate than students identified in the 12 other categories of the disabilities. The dropouts are 20% of population, but 80% of general prison. So students often have this trail towards general prison because of their EBD issues. Employment after high school, often because they are lacking some of the skills such as attention, language development, and controlling their aggression. They jump around between professions because they not only do not have adequate skills often because they dropped out of high school, but they also don't know how to properly work in the environment, so therefore they have to change jobs frequently. They're most common today in food services, but as I said before, they don't have the basic skills to hold a long-term job outside of high school. for their post-secondary education, if they ended up pursuing a 4-year degree, it's because they were taught to not consider themselves to have EBD. So that means that they were taught at an early age that their EBD is something that they control and it's not a disorder within themselves. So therefore, they're able to foster this and go on to a 4-year degree. But there also is, with people with the EBD mass population, there's lots of success in adult education programs. So this is after high school and after they've picked up some employment, and then they go back for post-secondary education. As adults, individuals with EBD have a hard time adjusting to the community because of the lack of basic skills, but also the intensity of their disorder or the type. There's an increased rate of incarceration, as I stated before, but most of the EBD individuals are financially independent, even though they hold such low-paying jobs, but they have high rates of violence-related activities.
Okay, so for my part, I focused on effective inclusive practices. The first part of this was challenges for general ed teachers. Students with behavior disorders may affect the learning of other students as well as themselves. One study indicates schools were found to average an implementation of 14 interventions for students with EBD or at risk for EBD. There are 6 key reasons students with EBD experience difficulty within the classroom. The first is many are not identified early and often are not provided appropriate supports at that point in time. There's an incongruence that exists between the needs of these students and instructional practices that are used with them. Many teachers are inadequately prepared to meet their needs. Services provided for those students may be fragmented and not reflect the collaboration necessary with involvement of professionals from multiple disciplines. The 5th reason is that emphasis on standard-based curriculum, high-stakes testing, and school accountability have combined to create more of a zero-tolerance school climate that is less conducive to addressing the broad needs of these students with EBD. And the final point is that the behaviors exhibited by these students have often been associated with interventions that resulted in students being removed from school rather than being educated in a proactive fashion with schools. The state of outcomes of students with EBD combined with truth of how the educational system operates is contrary to students' needs shows there's a lack of caring for students with EBD. A few more challenges are without collaboration between general ed teachers and special ed teachers, appropriate interventions are difficult to provide for students with EBD. Consistency in behavior management and other strategies among teachers and family members is also crucial. Classroom teachers usually make the initial recommendation for a pre-referral review for child study or teacher accommodations for students with EBD, and general ed teachers must deal with behavior problems of students that do not have EBD, so it could be hard to differentiate between the two. Differentiating for elementary instruction. The first step to success is a comprehensive program that was developed by Walker, Gawley, McLean, and Kimmich in 2005. This program includes proactive and universal screening, procedures for all children in kindergarten and first grade. It is an early intervention program to address emerging patterns of antisocial behavior and includes 3 components. The first is a screening and early detection procedure that provides 4 different options for use. The second is a school intervention component that teachers an adaptive behavior pattern to facilitate successful adjustment to the normal demands of schooling. And the last is a parent training component that teaches parents how to develop their child's school success skills. Consultants provide support for school interventions and training for parents related to supporting and improving adjustment at home as well. Okay, so the next is promoting inclusive practices. Teachers must make a special effort to keep themselves and their students from developing a negative attitude towards students with EBD. There are several tactics teachers can adapt for this that include using programs in which peers act as buddies or tutors for others, focusing on positive behaviors and providing appropriate reinforcements, using good behavior games in which all students work together to earn rewards. Strong teacher and student relationships are very important as well for successful inclusive practices. Mihalis and colleagues identified a series of specific strategies to help result in stronger caring teacher-student relationships. These include, but aren't limited to, teachers assuming a role as advocate for individual students, teachers getting to know students and understanding the lives they live, asking them on a regular basis for their feedback on experiences in the classroom and at school, among other things. So secondary school considerations, Wagner and Davis identified 5 key principles related to effective programming in secondary schooling for students with EBD related to successful school inclusion. These 5 key principles were meaningful relationships as a basis for school engagement, academic rigor provided through a challenging curriculum while accompanied by the academic supports necessary for success, learning opportunities that are relevant to the interests of students and their future plans, particularly as they may relate to career goals, attention to multiple needs of students with EBD, such as through coursework and extracurricular activities in which students are able to further explore their particular interests and develop their skills not limited just to academic areas, and active involvement of individual students and their families in transition planning so that it is person-centered and addresses key adult transition domains. According to Quartering and Christensen, student engagement is the key concept to successful school completion for students with EBD. Interventions should address engagement comprehensively, not only focusing on academic or behavioral skill deficits, but also social, interpersonal aspects of schooling, especially connections to other adults and peers. Differentiating for secondary instruction provides information on ways to promote school engagement. There's an access to age-appropriate transition assessments, direct links between school-based learning and life, opportunities to control destiny, engagement in non-academic aspects of school, and engagement in classroom learning. Collaboration is really important. Teachers are the key to the success of students with emotional and behavioral disorders, but teachers also need support, which may come from special education personnel, psychologists and counselors, and mental health service providers. Special educators can model methods of dealing with behavior problems and provide students with Tier 2 or Tier 3 instruction, which we'll talk about later. Psychologists and counselors provide comprehensive programs for students with EBD, and mental health personnel can provide support for both students and teachers. If mental health services are not available, teachers should work with school administrators to involve mental health specialists with students who display emotional and behavioral problems. The 3-tiered model is positive behavioral interventions and support system, which assesses and intervenes. It focuses on developing coordinated school-based change and incorporating consistent and positive interventions to create an environment that supports and recognizes appropriate behavior. This creates school environments that clearly identify, teach, and support appropriate behavior and addresses the development of preventable behavior problems. And then this is just an example of the 3-tiered model. The top level is tertiary prevention. This is specialized and individualized. The systems for students with high risk would be here. Secondary prevention is a specialized group, systems for students with at-risk behavior, but not necessarily that are as risk as the tertiary prevention. And the primary prevention is a school classroom-wide system for all students, staff, and settings.
So moving on from Steph's part with the 3-tiered model, we're going to move on to the teacher's role in helping an EBD student. So pretty much the basics are the teacher has to be willing to make adaptions for the student and help them develop their social skills in the classroom and with other students, as well as the teacher has to be very prepared to have interventions with EBD students because it is something that will occur and will not be avoidable. As well as teachers are going to have to work especially close with special ed teachers and mental health personnel in concerning your EBD students. So moving on, adaptions are a critical part of working with your EBD students. There are multiple different adaptions. The first one being curricular adaptions, and pretty much for curricular adaptions, you have to it involves many different methods as to how your EBD student is going to be able to learn and adapt. And for the many different methods you must use to try and teach social skills, as well as just everyday learning skills to your EBD student. You also must encourage them to have good social relations, including methods such as modeling, direct instruction, prompting, and positive practice. Ultimately, it's up to the teacher to figure out which method will work best for each EBD student, and that each EBD student is different. No two cases are exactly alike. Alright, so moving on to instructional adaptions. Instructional adaptions are, it's just going to be certain EBD students need instructions given certain ways. So there's different ones such as providing appropriate structure and predictable routines, establishing a structured and consistent classroom environment, establishing a consistent schedule, set rules and consequences, pretty much giving them a sense of safety so that they know what's coming, as well as when you transition from doing one thing into another. EBD students, it's very helpful to them if they have, a time. So they have, like, say okay, we're going to be transitioning to this in 3 minutes. So it gives them time to mentally prepare to move on to another activity. Moving on, behavioral support is a big one. It has many different ones underneath it, such as positive behavior supports, which include all of those skills that increase likelihood of success and personal satisfaction in academic, work, social, recreational, community, and family settings. It gives your students a support group. Support encompasses all those educational methods that can be used to teach, strengthen, and expand positive behavior and increase opportunities for the display of positive behavior. So pretty much it is that. And then moving on, there's also a behavioral intervention plan, which we will talk much more in detail about later in a couple more slides. Physical adaptions. Your EBD student might be very hyperactive or just might break down. So a lot of times it'll help if you arrange traffic patterns to lessen contact for your EBD student when they're traveling from class to class, or even just within the classroom itself, so there will be less contact and less disruptions. You should arrange students' desks to facilitate monitoring of all the students at all the times, so you can always, if you see something going awry, you can stop it and put an end to it before it gets too bad or gets worse. Locate students with tendencies towards disruptive behaviors near the teachers. So pretty much put the students that will have issues near someone that can help them. So when they do see them starting to go off, they can hopefully, stop it, correct it as soon as possible. As well as you should locate students away from stored materials that they could find tempting. A lot of kids find, markers, glues, pens, pencils, paper. Anything that isn't their schoolwork can be distracting to them, and they will use any, reason to go and get it out of their way to do it. So you should also create a space where students can do quiet work. So if, they just want to go and they need a space to sit and be, very in tune with themselves, so they don't have to be bothered by the rest of the classroom, or they just need a moment so they don't break down fully, you should have one of those ready and prepared as well. So moving on, we'll go to the different types of wraparound services. Pretty much what a wraparound service is, it's a community-based care. It's giving, our EBD students, they're not only going to be just in school for their entire lives, they're also going to be out in, the normal world. So what it is, it's about giving the student a whole community that will give them support and give them different types of, utilities that they can use to just be a normal functioning member of society. For students with EBD, the school setting is only one environment that they must be responsive to their needs. In addition, other needed services typically include mental health organizations, social services, and juvenile and criminal justice systems. It's not something that they all will be a part of, but it is a possibility, and it's something that we need to be prepared for, as well as we need to help try and keep the EBD students out of it. Another adaptation that we have to be considering of is medical. Different medications and things of that nature can cause students to be either hyperactive or very lethargic and tired and sleepy, and it can make them aggressive, and it just is something that we need to be aware of and we need to be able to adapt for accordingly. So moving on to the behavioral, or going back to the behavioral intervention plan, which is a part of, it's a part of the behavioral support system. A behavioral intervention plan can be thought of as a plan to support the student in order to help him or her change behavior. It wants to make the child better. The plan should focus on the whole child and teach the child coping strategies. Effective support plans consist of multiple interventions or support strategies and are not punishments. Positive behavioral intervention plans increase the acquisition of and use of new alternative skills, decrease the problem behavior, and facilitate general improvements in the quality of life of the individual, his or her family, and the members of the support team. So pretty much when this is happening, your student will more or less have a 504 plan, and they'll have a whole team, or it's possible for them to have a team to help with their everyday life and everything of that nature. Just it makes it so it's not just about the student doing it on their own. It gives them a goal, it gives them a plan, it gives them people who are going to help hold that student responsible for all of that. Moving on, continuing with the behavioral intervention plan, it's about comprehensive behavior intervention plans have antecedents in setting event modifications, the style of alternative skills, consequence strategies, and lifestyle interventions. And then some examples of positive supports that might be included for your BIP are teaching the child replacement behaviors. So if a child is acting out, you can show them what it's like, or you can show them, what happens if they behave properly instead. Then there's rewarding the child for using the socially acceptable behaviors, teaching the child to avoid the behavior triggers, teaching the child to identify emotions, changing the responses of the adults, changing negative stimuli in the environment, identifying a caring adult to give good positive time at school, supporting the child at problematic times. These are just all positive things that us as teachers can do to help support our students with EBD, and especially those that are already having a behavioral intervention plan. So this was the part in class that we discussed, in our field study. Have you come across an EBD student? How did your cooperating teacher handle them? And then how would you handle an EBD student in your classroom? Yeah, that was a really good discussion, everybody. I'm proud of you all. All right, so moving on, our group also looked up a bunch of different outside resources that teachers can use to handle students with EBD. Here, let's click on the first one. So this is 5 tips for handling EBD kids in an inclusive classroom. Keep class rules clear and simple and clear. Reward positive behaviors. Allow for mini breaks, and make sure there's fair treatment for all. Let's go back into the PowerPoint and see what other ones we have. Let's go to the third one. Please ignore whatever this is. 8 tips for teachers. Quick facts, tips for teachers. Learn more about the student's specific mental health disturbance. Learn more about the student's strengths too, because the student is more than just whatever their EBD is or whatever disorder or disability they have in general. Remember, they're kids first, so, I mean, kids like to play, kids like to goof off. All kids like to color. So always, crayons are great. Let's look at, we'll do one more. Creating classroom rules for students with emotional and behavior disorder, a decision-making guide. This one I read and it was very good. It was very descriptive. It talked in a bunch of, who should make the classroom rules and how the classroom rules should be made. It includes, talking about involving the students, making sure the students understand, what is a fair rule, what isn't a fair rule, and, how will you communicate these rules to your students and carry them out in a fair and fashionable manner for all students. And as a wrap-up, we had this lovely video.
Students with emotional behavior disorders are categorized as having emotional disturbances. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, emotional behavior disorders are defined as a condition exhibiting one or more of the following characteristics over a long period of time and to a marked degree that adversely affects a child's educational performance. The first characteristic is the inability to learn that can't be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. The second characteristic is the inability to have interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers. And finally, the third characteristic is the inappropriate behavior or feelings under normal circumstances. Struggling uphill, but you act like you don't care. Right now, you could really use a shoulder, hanging on to the edge till it's over. She's crying for your love tonight. Lonely, it's hard to survive. She said, I don't wanna be left in this war tonight, and I alone in this fight. Is anybody out there? I don't wanna be left in this world behind. Say you'll run to my side. Is anybody out there? His name was Adam. When his mom had him, dad was a phantom, never took a look at him. He grew a Madden, never had a friend near. Hated outdoors, always in play Madden. Adam was lonely, drugs were the only way out of his own life. Now he's slowly losing fire, and he's close to retire. But one last hope, he puts his arms up higher, and I can see him crying out, yeah. Is there anybody out there? He's really counting on your love, still struggling uphill, but you act like you don't care. Right now, he could really use a shoulder, hanging on to the edge till it's over. He's crying for your love tonight. Lonely, it's hard to survive. He said, I don't wanna be left in this war tonight, and I alone in this fight. Is anybody out there? I don't wanna be left in this world behind. Say you'll run to my side. Is anybody out there? I don't wanna be left in this war tonight. Am I alone in this fight? Is anybody out there? It's